Welcome to the Proceedings Podcast. I'm Bill Hamblet, the Editor-in-Chief of Proceedings at the U.S. Naval Institute. Today is Thursday, 5 June 2025. 83 years ago this week, U.S. and Japanese carrier forces were waging a ferocious battle in the seas and skies around Midway Atoll in the Pacific. Today's episode is brought to you by Booz Allen. Booz Allen delivers outcomes with speed for the nation's most critical defense priorities. Work with solution engineers who use AI, cyber, and quantum to help warfighters collaborate faster with allies and partners from the open seas to the edge of space. Learn more at boozallen.com/defense. Okay, my guest today is Royal Navy Vice Admiral Mike Utley. He's the commander of Allied Maritime Command. Admiral, it's great to have you on the show.
Thanks, Bill. It's great to be here. Thank you for the opportunity.
Yeah, of course. Originally, we intended to do this interview last month during our International Navies Focus. How are things in London today?
Well, it's raining, so that's not a surprise. But I don't think the world has got any less busy. So MARCOM is extremely busy at the moment. There's a lot going on, and I look forward to exploring that with you over the period of this interview.
Awesome. Before we get to talking about your command, about Allied Maritime Command, tell our audience a little bit about yourself. The U.S. Navy would call you a SWO, a Surface Warfare Officer. So you've served on and commanded a bunch of ships in the Royal Navy. Tell us about those.
Yeah, so I've been extremely fortunate. I think I'm on my 10th command now. I've commanded everything from very small patrol boats up to aircraft carrier. And in formations, I've commanded a NATO task group, as well as the new UK Carrier Strike Group. I was the first commander of that, brought F-35 to that. After that, UK Commander Strike Forces, so everything from the Royal Marines to the Carrier Strike and everything else, before I came here about 2.5 years ago to take up command as the theatre component commander for NATO in the maritime.
Yeah, a lot of commands. A big difference there between the U.S. Navy and the Royal Navy, I'll just point out, is that in the U.S. Navy, aircraft carriers can only be commanded by aviators. But in the Royal Navy, it sounds like surface warfare officers, whatever that equivalent is, I'm not sure what you call yourselves, you can command an aircraft carrier, and you have.
Yeah, so the badge that you can probably see there means that I'm a command qualified surface warfare officer in the Royal Navy, but we don't insist that aircraft carrier captains or CSG commanders or anything else have to be one thing or the other. We're very happy for it to be surface or air. What is a requirement is that you've got a command qualification. So that's the only real requirement.
Gotcha. Well, let's talk about your command now. What is Allied Maritime Command, and what's the major function?
So the alliance is split up into a whole bunch of commands. The traditional environments, as well as cyber, space, SOF. And they really command all assets from the alliance across the area of responsibility, the Euro-Atlantic. And they are responsible to 3 joint force commands for delivery of normal military effects. And we're in a process of transition at the moment where MARCOM, AirCom, LANCOM, SOFCOM, they have traditionally got on during peacetime and delivered the effects in the past with the standing NATO forces, the maritime groups that I command. As we go forward, then the Joint Force Commanders will come into very much the day-to-day running within their joint operating areas, and their effects will be delivered by the component commanders. So fundamentally, I am the maritime commander and the principal maritime advisor at NATO to Supreme Allied Commander Europe.
So your immediate superior in command is the Supreme Commander?
That's correct.
Got it. Interesting. And so the those special operations forces, cyber command, et cetera, that fall under NATO, they are your peers then?
That's correct. Yeah.
Gotcha. Okay. All right. That helps. Tell us a little bit about some of the, operations that are happening in the standing maritime task groups that are operating in and around the European and Atlantic theaters.
I mean, the world has moved on, Bill. So yes, I still have the maritime task groups, 4 of them, 2 destroyer and frigate task groups, 2 mine warfare task groups. But increasingly, MARCOM is following a campaign approach, an effects-based campaign approach to the entirety of the theatre to deliver those deterrence and defence effects across the entirety of the theatre. So that means we've got a far bigger coordination role than we've ever had before. For example, right now, I have a commander task force, a 2-star German-led staff in the Baltic Sea region who are commanding NATO forces there, but also coordinating all activity to make sure that A, we achieve the effects that we mean to, and B, we can manage that part of the theatre effectively with regards to escalation and de-escalation. So the world has moved on from these sort of 4 little task groups that was commanded out of Northwood to go and do some NATO interoperability training and defence engagement to a organisation which is far more concerned with military effects and the deterrence of those that challenge us and the assurance of the 1 billion people that sit under the NATO flag.
Gotcha. Okay. So there's been a lot of changes in the geopolitical landscape over the past few years, most notably, of course, the Russian invasion, illegal invasion, I always say, of Ukraine and the ongoing war there. And all of those things that have been happening have an effect on NATO's force structure and its readiness posture. Can you give us some perspective about your NATO maritime headquarters and your emphasis and mission focus and ability to generate the force and the effects that you were just talking about a minute ago?
Well, of course, I'm reliant on the allies to generate those forces for use. And what we are increasingly trying to do, we recognise that warships and the sailors that push them around, as well as submarines, maritime aircraft, these are precious instruments that cost a lot of money and, are difficult to force generate and keep running. So my approach to this is that if someone is conducting a national exercise or a bilateral, trilateral exercise, why don't we dock that into DDA effects management? And because that, by its very presence, is delivering effect for NATO. So the force generation is no longer just about the 4 task groups. It's about how you coordinate the activity that everyone is doing. Every ship at sea that belongs to an ally is effectively a NATO ship. And we get that thrown at us by our opposition all the time. So let's coordinate that activity and make sure that it's consistent, that we're giving the right messages, and that in terms of readiness, we are there, and ready to go for the be prepared to defend function. Bill, what I'm not going to do is pretend that everything is rosy. I think, there's been a huge amount about spending on defence, about how many ships there are, both in lots of the nation's capitals and more broadly across the alliance. You quite rightly raised the fact that 2022 was a moment of inflection in terms of the strategic challenge within the Euro-Atlantic. It was, but we've got to be realists and understand that it will take nations time to catch up, particularly when, the world isn't only about the Euro-Atlantic.
Sure.
It's about the Indo-Pacific. it's about shipping routes which underpin our economic success. And we've seen those challenged by proxies and by state-sponsored forces over the last 18 months. So there are many global aspects that also impact the theatre. So my headquarters seeks to not just deal with all our friends and allies and partners within the Euro-Atlantic, but increasingly we'll talk with organisations like Fifth Fleet, Seventh Fleet outside, so that we better understand those pressures that A, sit on our allies in terms of fourth generation, but B, can undermine the ashore function. You know, if shipping doesn't get to where it needs to, when it needs to, then we pretty quickly get markets react in a bad way to that. And we've seen that and the impact that has on inflation and interest rates in particular. So it's a team sport, not just within the Euro-Atlantic, but out with it as well.
Got it. I want to ask two follow-on questions just because that explanation just triggered some other, thoughts in my head. How much time, sir, do you spend, coordinating or on the phone or emails with, for example, the U.S. Sixth Fleet Commander?
So it's one of my closest relationships, right? So
Right.
Myself and the Sixth Fleet Commander cooperate extremely closely. But of course, the Sixth Fleet Commander is also the commander of Strike Force NATO and the main route by which the US Navy can deliver carrier power and the US Marine Corps amphibious power into the alliance. So both from an alliance standpoint, but also on a day-to-day running of the theatre standpoint, we are incredibly closely linked, as I am with Second Fleet, who is also the Joint Force Commander in Norfolk. And indeed,
Right.
I'm having dinner with him tonight. So every day I spend time liaising with fellow chiefs of navies, fleet commanders, right across the piece. And US Navier and his fleets are right at the front of that.
Got it. Sir, can I ask you to give just a brief strategic level view of the maritime environment now in your area of responsibility in the European Atlantic area? I'll just preface that. A couple weeks ago on the show, we interviewed a German and Swedish author who had teamed up to write an article in our May issue about the challenges in the Baltic, maritime insecurity in the Baltic Sea. So I'm pretty familiar with what's happening there. I'm a little less familiar right now with what the Russian Northern Fleet has been doing up in the high north and in the Atlantic. So if you could touch on that a little bit, and also, does your area of responsibility, do you span across the Mediterranean all the way to say
Yes.
the Levant area?
Yes, I do. So firstly, to sort of advance my last comments, you can't look at the Euro-Atlantic as something on its own, particularly not in the maritime. The 37 years I've been going to sea, not once have I seen a line in the ocean saying, this is not your problem.
Right.
So what happens outside matters inside. And I take my deter and ashore tasks extremely seriously. So global shipping and interruption and potential interruption to global shipping is very large on my agenda. And what we've seen over the last 18 months with the Houthis and what they've done in the Bab el-Mandeb and the Red Sea, that has given us sort of 1.3, 1.4 major shipping routes into the Euro-Atlantic now, unless you want to go right across the Pacific. So the potential disruption to that one shipping route that's remaining around Africa is of constant concern to me, and of constant concern to our allies. And if we look at the way in which the Russians are operating across Africa and their interests in the Central African Republic and in Mali, they are continually running vessels down there to supply with weapons and destabilize, from our perspective, the region even further. So, shipping, the impact on shipping and the economic impact that has on our populations is front and center. In terms of the Mediterranean, well, honestly, I commanded a NATO task group down there in 2018, and I was there when the post-Duma chemical attack strikes went in, and I thought I've never seen the Mediterranean this contested and unstable. Of course, then in 2022, Russia opened a front against Ukraine, and the Black Sea has also changed in terms of not in terms of its strategic importance, but in terms of its maritime nature and the military vessels that go in there. We do not go in there right now. So, around 25% of world shipping goes into the Black Sea. That was very challenged for the first couple of years of the conflict.
Sorry,
I think,
sir, say that again. 25% of the world's shipping goes into the Black Sea?
Goes into the Black Sea.
I did not know it was that high.
Yeah.
That's an impressive figure.
And also, depending on, I'll throw you an even more disturbing figure, that, over half of all merchant seamen are of Russian or ethnic Russian origin.
Half.
So, more than.
I thought I would have guessed Filipino, because I know that there's a lot of Philippine merchant seamen, right?
So there is a huge amount of Russian influence in normal shipping. And therefore, and I'm not for a second suggesting that every single one of them is a spy or every single one of them has malign intent. Of course I'm not. But the facts are, when people talk about the shadow fleet, which I hate as a term, and I'll tell you why in a moment.
Okay.
There is a degree of reality in terms of the amount of influence that Russia has over merchant shipping. And when you look at the growth of the Chinese merchant fleet, the exponential growth of the Chinese merchant fleet, and we see this when you look at a flag of a vessel, then you look at the management of the vessel, then you look at the flag, the flag behind that. Yeah. A lot of roads lead to one or other of those nations. So the stability in the Eastern Med, the stability in the Black Sea really matters in underpinning the economic sustainability of our model. And if that collapses, then we're in big trouble, right? So we are challenged, very much so, in that environment. And I'm very pleased to say, we rise to that challenge. We coordinate across the entire theatre such that we are tracking the vessels of interest. We're certainly tracking the vessels of critical interest, and we're tracking every warship movement, either with a ship with it or with air or other assets, from a seabed to space perspective. You asked me to comment on the North. It's difficult for a NATO officer to comment on the North because there are several organisations that are interested in the North Atlantic. From my perspective as Commander MARCOM, it's about cooperating with those organisations like CTF 169 and others to ensure that we can demonstrate our block to defend at the GI UK gap and have influence up to the bastion at a moment of our choosing. So that is very much what we're focused on. We have seen no depletion in out of area deployments by Russian submarines. But what we work very hard on is our ability to, interrupt force generation of those that challenge us. And there's a great degree of cooperation in trying to do that. In the Atlantic writ large, Well, peacetime day-to-day running, it's really about those out of area deployers when they deploy out of the north. But as I say, there's a huge amount of competence in our ability to deal with that.
Sure. Yeah. Yeah. So following Russian submarines that come out of the Severomorsk area, or their surface ships, their surface combatants when they come down out of the bastion and into or near or through the GIUK gap, the ability of the alliance, you're saying, to surveil them, to know where they are, to follow them.
So I would
very
would
high.
characterize it as a combination of the alliance and national efforts
Sure.
together. Okay, that's how I would certainly not for a second say the alliance does all that.
Yeah.
There is cooperation between allies at a national, bilateral, trilateral level that deals with a lot of that, but we will support that.
Yeah, yeah. So I'm just curious. You said there's been no diminishment of Russian out of area deployments from their northern fleet in the 3 years. Yeah, subsurface in the 3.5 years since the war kicked off. So
I mean, honestly, in their surface fleets, it's let's say they're finding it challenging.
Got it.
We see routine interfleet transfers, and particularly since they lost their basing in Tartus, their model has had to change to support what they see as their interests in the Mediterranean, and that puts strain on anyone's fleet.
Sure.
And it has definitely put strain on their fleet. Plus, of course, there's the losses that they've suffered in the Black Sea fleet, which are considerable.
Right, right. So I want to get to the Baltic Sea in specific, and there's been a lot of news the past year and a half or so, actually even longer than that, about destabilizing acts in the Baltic, centered around sabotage, critical underwater infrastructure, those Gazprom undersea natural gas pipelines that were sabotaged. And more recently, evidence of Chinese flagged or Russian ghost fleet ships dragging anchor, probably intentionally, across some of that undersea, cable infrastructure, communications cable infrastructure. Talk a little bit about NATO's response to those acts. Is the consensus that those were intentional sabotage, or was there any chance that any of those were just poor seamanship by commercial ships?
I mean, if I may just come back to the sort of ghost fleet, shadow fleet thing for a second.
Please.
I think we really shoot ourselves in the foot by referring to these illegal ships as shadow fleet or ghost fleet. We credit perhaps Russia with a fleet structure, a sort of peering round the door, black cloak dagger type structure that is not there. Simply these are illegal vessels for the fact that they don't have a flag, or they don't have insurance, or they're not of the correct build type, or they're not inspected, or they're using the wrong fuel. This is a legal activity.
Got it.
Writ large. And I think by joining it up and calling it this sort of sinister thing, we're giving the strategic communication of our Challenger a big boost. So that's the first point. To come to your specific question, look, hybrid has been around for a long time. We've called it lots of different things over the years. It's a bit like integrated or joint, or the facts are hybrid. You can trace back all the way to 81 years ago tomorrow and D-Day. We've been doing hybrid stuff for a long time. They have been doing hybrid stuff for a long time. I think it's the line at which you decide that hybrid stuff is no longer acceptable. Now, in critical underwater infrastructure, you said, can I give a hint whether or not I think they're actual attacks or coordinate, or a bag of GRU money has been given to really, Bill, it doesn't matter. The outcome is the same. Okay, as a commander responsible for deterring ashore, if the lights go out in an allied country, or the TV stops working, or the data isn't flowing in any region of the alliance, it completely undermines the ashore part of my campaign and my job. So given the series of events that had happened, it was decided that we would stand up an operation called Baltic Sentry, which is both a command and a coordinate operation across the Baltic Sea region in various areas to protect that national infrastructure, undersea infrastructure. And to date, it's worked. And that's through a combination of hailing, presence, intelligence, all sorts of things to shut down that. Now, was it incompetence? Some of it probably was. It's kind of embarrassing when big countries have merchant fleets that their crews are not really that capable of navigating their ships, their merchant interests, in not even confined waters. The Baltic has some areas of confined waters, but the shipping routes are very much in open water by and large, except when you enter or leave. But for me, it doesn't really matter either way. It undermines our deterrence credibility, and it certainly undermines assurance for those populations in the region. And NATO has done something about it. Secondly, within my headquarters, we have opened the Critical Underwater Infrastructure Centre, which sits alongside the NATO Shipping Centre, both under my command. And we're investing in technology to give us better, persistent understanding of shipping patterns, shipping activity, not just in the Baltic, but across the entire region. And hopefully, eventually, outside as well. As I described to you earlier, it's rare that something originates from inside the Euro-Atlantic. It normally is originating from well outside SACEUR's area of responsibility. And then we've seen a Russian reaction. Of course we have. It shouldn't surprise us that something that is so fundamentally important to their economic interests would not get a reaction. I would describe that as coordinated and coherent. In no way do I see it as really threatening freedom of action and freedom of navigation in the Baltic Sea. And just today, the US-led BOLTOPS exercise, huge exercise, is getting underway. So in no way is that restricting our freedom of action and our freedom of navigation in that area.
Can you be a little bit more specific about some of the reactions that you've seen from the Russians, from either their?
None of it would surprise you. I mean, the first reaction took about 5 months, right? That says something. Coordinated buzzing by aircraft, ships sat in stations. Honestly, pretty much the opposite of what or the same, I should say, as what we're doing in terms of Baltic Century. So and I don't think we should be surprised or challenged by that.
Gotcha. So in reaction to Baltic Century, which is a regional coordinated NATO operation to have better situational awareness of the Baltic, to map all that critical infrastructure, to try to keep better track of what's coming and going and what they're doing, right? The Russians have responded in kind. So their Baltic fleet and aircraft are out a little bit more. They're paying close attention to your operations, right? Your forces' operations.
That's correct. Yeah, that's exactly right.
Got it. Got it. Have any of those, the fact that now you've got more units at sea from both sides, right? Any dangerous activity, any shouldering, any, hey, we got close to them, they got close to us?
I've been operating around the Russian Federation Navy for many years. Sometimes they get close.
Yeah.
Sometimes they don't, right?
Okay.
I think it's where navies are slightly different in that you can station a brigade on the Estonian border, and my army friends aren't going to thank me for saying this, but they may never see a Russian brigade. Okay,
right.
We're out there every day. We're alongside Russian warships, alongside Russian aircraft, alongside Russian submarines, doing our business. And that I believe gives you an operational maturity on both sides. Of course, the key is to spot when something changes.
Yeah.
Has something changed? Has a reaction changed? So continuity of action, which we've seen a lot in our operations in the Gulf, for example. You know, with the IRGCN, you follow an understood pathway. And as long as you both do that, then, you get a fairly even status quo. It's when something changes, we need to be alert enough to know that's changed and be able to react to it.
Yeah, that's a great point. So we're seeing just an absolute technological revolution unfolding before our eyes. Of course, the over the weekend attacks by Ukrainian drones throughout Russia, a real deep strike, insurgent operation, if you will, against Russian strategic bombers. That was very impressive. At the same time, on the Black Sea, the Ukrainian Navy has really pulled off a very impressive sea denial campaign against the Russian Black Sea fleet. You got to give it to them that Ukraine really doesn't have a navy anymore, and yet they've been able to deny the Black Sea, or most of the Black Sea, to the Russian Navy. How is NATO integrating unmanned systems into its maritime forces? What are you seeing? What are the forces working with you and under you doing in terms of unmanned systems, both or all three, air, surface, and subsurface forces?
Say the nations bring their own capabilities, firstly, and every nation is developing their own capability set, whether that's a very small airborne drone for, fairly close imagery, or something far more complex like an MQ-9. There's a whole scale. I think what I am doing with Supreme Allied Commander Transformation is I'm running a series of operational exercises. The next one will be in the Baltic region, where I'm bringing the kind of drone technology that is available and operating it primarily within the alliance context for persistent understanding, to improve our wide-scale understanding of maritime traffic. That's the prime aim. The second aim is that the alliance develops and provides a network approach such that nations can bring their own capabilities, understand the standards that you need to have to get on the network, and then data fuse that in a way with the technology that's available to vastly improve decision superiority. We must be able to, with our technological advantage, fuse this information and decide on it far more quicker than our challengers or enemies can. And that's the work that I'm doing with Supreme Allied Commander Transformation. It's the work that some of the allies are developing on their own. But I'm also working with Task Force 66, for example, on the US side in progressing that as quickly as we possibly can. Then I have a series of activity called Dynamic Messenger, where we do broad scale experimentation. And we've specifically looked at underwater networks and how you network underwater capabilities in a far more coherent manner than perhaps has been done in the past. Now, all of this is, of course, strewn with national security issues, national industry interests, and everything else. What we all know, is we've got to work our way past that stuff and get to a level where we can share all that information and decide better than those challenges against us. So I welcome that. On a second point is, yes, my word, Ukraine has been incredibly successful from a disrupt and a destroy perspective, incredibly successful. What I characterize this journey as, though, is a marathon, not a sprint. We can't throw everything away that we have today in order that we'll replace everything with drones. You know, some of the ocean conditions that we work on and in are extremely inhospitable at times, and heavy metal, you know, aircraft with people in them, submarines with people in them, still have a role in a system of systems approach. Sure. And I think many people are aligned in that, particularly carrier nations who want to move towards a sort of combined air group of autonomous and people in aircraft in the future. So it's a journey where we make ourselves open to industry. We bring industry much, much closer to us, that we can help with the technology development, tell them what our requirements are, and then put that into action far more quickly than perhaps we have in the past. You know, a destroyer taking 15 to 20 years to get from drawing board to being in the water. Those days are gone, man. I mean, they're just gone.
Too long, right?
What we need is a platform that we can plug, understand, and deliver digital effect, cyber effect today. And it needs to be open architecture such that we can spirally develop it. Industry are up for that challenge. We've got the best minds in the world in our nations, in the alliance. You know, I don't fear it. I welcome that challenge, and let's see how quickly we can go and move that forward, because I think it will give us a great edge.
Sir, I want to come back to the Black Sea for a minute. And a few minutes ago, you mentioned that NATO forces have really avoided sending ships and naval units up into the Black Sea during the conflict, right? At some point, this war, as all wars do, will come to a conclusion through some sort of a peace settlement. And do you envision that NATO will have a role in the maritime domain, in enforcing a peace, or enforcing some sort of before a peace, a ceasefire up in the Black Sea, and will that be led by your command?
So you're asking a largely political question,
of course,
because, and it won't surprise you as a military commander that I'm going to dodge that immediately, particularly in the alliance context, because there's 32 leaders that will have an opinion on that. However, you know, what I will say as a military commander is that, of course, we will conduct planning for any eventuality. So you know, are we, MARCOM, working with others to develop and have developed plans to re-enter the Black Sea, deal with the mine threat, secure freedom of action, freedom of navigation? Yes, of course we have. Of course we have. Could MARCOM command that or part of that? Yes, of course it could. you know, and when I took my NATO task group in 18 into the Black Sea and 12.1 miles off Crimea at the time, you know, there was a whole organization that was set up to do that, and that hasn't changed. In fact, it's got better. So could we do it? Yes. Are we doing military prudent planning? Of course we are, like any military commander would. Who will make the decision? It's political, and that's not for me.
Of course. That's a great answer, though. It's just good to know that that the planning is happening. Not that anybody would doubt that, but that it could be a mission that falls to your command. So yeah, really interesting there. We're running short on time, sir. I just wanted to ask you, as a Royal Navy officer, and you know, the U.S. and the Great Britain have shared a special relationship, a deep friendship for a very long time, especially the past 85 years as we fought together in World War II, and then everything since then. Any parting thoughts from you on the enduring value of the alliance and how that impacts maritime security for both of our great countries?
So I'll take my NATO hat off for 1 second and be Mike Utley, Vice Admiral, Royal Navy. Look, there's a lot of platitudes about special relationship, and again, I'll leave that for the politicians. What I will say is I have operated and fought alongside my US colleagues for the last 37 years. And I have great friends, you know, and trust no one more than them with my own personal safety. And I can give no better compliment than that. It's been one of the great honors of my career to work with the US Navy in some very difficult conditions, but also the US Marine Corps and the US Army and so yeah, it goes without saying, we are literally brothers in arms and have been for many years, as you lay out. I think you know, if I was going to give a parting shot from an alliance perspective, our credibility and unity is at the very heart of what we are, whether that's an economic model, whether it's a military model, whether it's our cultures, whether it's our values. It's at the very heart of what we are. And it's what people are so jealous of, you know, and seek to undermine. We must hold those very dear, is Mike Utley's view, not NATO's view, not you know, is Mike Utley's view. We must hold those very dear. And there's plenty of examples in history where people have held that sort of thing too cheaply, and it's awfully hard to get back. So, you know, our ability to live together, trade together, fight together are incredibly important. And you know, I hope that continues long into the future, because many people who would seek to undermine us are very jealous of that and try to recreate it through BRICS and other types of organizations. In NATO, we've got 76 years of experience of that. We're a long way down the road.
Yeah, the quality of our friends and allies is much better than the quality of the friends and allies of our adversaries, right?
And the trust that brings, the trust that enduring relationships bring are incredibly important. None more so, of course, as I alluded to in the comments about UK-US, none more so than in the military, where you really want to trust the person next to you that they're going to do their thing and they have got your best interests at heart as well as their own.
Yeah, well put, sir. I will leave it at that, because I can't top that. The way you just put it, very eloquent. My guest today has been Royal Navy Vice Admiral Mike Utley. He's the Commander, Allied Maritime Command, a headquarters for NATO based in Northwood, UK, just outside of London. Admiral, thanks for your time today. This was a great conversation.
Thanks very much indeed, Bill. Thanks for the opportunity.